It is very strange. We've noticed that with like CGI on TV and stuff. I thought it was me, and I asked like my wife and kids, I'm like, is CGI getting worse? Like every time we watch it, it looks like so like 80s kind of like, CGI now. And I was like, no, I think it is getting worse. So like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
weird. You always think everything just progresses, and then until you live long enough to see that, nope, it doesn't. Sometimes you have dips, and
I totally agree with that because you're right. Because when you're looking at it, it's just like, are they purposely trying to, do a homage to like 80s CGI? Like, what's happening here?
exactly. Writers, readers, drinkers, lend me your ears and your livers. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey, the show that's been making writers cool again since, I don't know, 2 years ago. I am your host, William R. Hincy, who ironically isn't cool, but I'm cast into this gig. And joining me today, I'm really honored and privileged to have Jessica L. Sparrow. Jessica, welcome to the
Hey,
bar.
thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah.
This
And,
is awesome. I'm excited.
also, yeah, I am too. And I know I say that I'm making writers. You're already cool. I'm just really shedding a light on the coolness of writers, is what I'm trying to do.
Oh, thank you.
So let me give you the brief intro here. The Cliff Notes version, or as I like to say, the Whiskey Notes version of it. So you write, and I'll take this from your bio: the spine-tingling Puerto Rican Gothic tales, thrillers, and poetry. The poetry collection was Visions and Nightmares of a Gothic Rican. I'm sorry, I'm light reflecting off of my screen, so I'm having a hard time reading it. Thank you. You're a speaker, professor, and I'm gonna blow this word. I meant to ask you beforehand, but I also think it's funny when I mess up. So this will be on the final take for sure.
Go
Is
for
it
it.
a boomba dancer? A bomba dancer? How do you say that?
So it's bomba. Bomba.
Bomba. Bomba. Okay.
Yeah.
But my wife is Chinese, and she speaks Cantonese. Well, you get to meet her when we're at C3,
Yeah,
but she
cool.
speaks Cantonese, and she was trying to teach me some of the words, and she used to think I was
Mhm.
botching it on purpose. And at some point, she just realized, like, oh, you literally don't even hear the sounds, do you? And I think it's like that when I sing too. I just don't hear the sounds. I think I'm nailing it. I'm a karaoke legend in my mind, but apparently
Aren't
I'm
we
nailing.
all?
Yeah, very good. Was there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you pretty much got the intro there. Yeah, bomba dancer. I'm not professional bomba dancer, but I know a little bit enough to teach some people here and there.
Uh-huh. Very good. Very good. Awesome. And so I love the kind of break the ice here with asking where you are in the world, generally, and what's the best place to get a drink there.
Oh, so I am actually in Maryland in Odenton. So I'm lucky enough to be 30 minutes from, DC, Annapolis, Baltimore. So pretty much you can get the drink anywhere around here. We're
Hmm.
well, speaking for myself, I'm Melage. No, but there was this really cool speakeasy that I went to in Baltimore. I believe it's called I want to say the Elk Lodge. I don't quote me on that. It had something to do with an elk,
Uh-huh.
but
Sure.
it's definitely one of those speakeasies that you cannot find for the life of you when you get there. There are
Uh-huh.
no numbers for the address on like any of the buildings, and it's like in between a restaurant with all these glass windows. So I'm pretty sure the chefs and the servers and the people who are at the restaurant get a kick out of people just, mulling around, looking around. I
Right.
see they're just like pointing like you want that over there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's pretty awesome. And I wish like I had it in my brain like where exactly it was, but just Google speakeasy in Baltimore. I think it has something to
Sure.
do with an elk. Very
Uh-huh.
nice, very chill. Had like a jazz trio at that time. So yeah.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's fun. And if you remember the name after the show, I can always plug it in the description for
Oh yeah,
everyone. If
yeah.
not, they can Google it. But that's funny because there's a place in Anaheim, so Disneyland, the Angels. It's actually kind of right in between those two things, Angel
Mhm.
Stadium and Disneyland. Um, And it's like one of those like kind of like big like food courts, kind of like an adult food court though, like kind of nicer, like
Okay.
usually a bar or some things there. I think they have some other shops. It's been a little while since we've been there.
Hmm.
But they have a speakeasy in there. And it is
Oh,
so tiny. And you make reservations and they kind of tell you where to go so you can kind of find it. But when you walk out, the door, I think it's meant to look like barrels or something, and the door opens. And every time someone's standing there, the door opens. So it's like, what in the world were they come from? And it's this little like space called the Blind Rabbit, little space in there. And
oh,
then they usually have a guy on the piano, and it's real dark, even though it's very bright out in the other room. You go in there, and you feel like you're in an old timey kind of speakeasy. So it's pretty neat. It's cool that those started popping up. Actually, I always think they're fun to the different
they
little
are.
takes they take on them.
I love those. Like I'm always like stuck in, in some different era. So I mean, aside from like the Gothic era, right? Because of my writing, but I
Uh-huh.
do love the whole like 1920s feel or 1920s for sure. But there was another speakeasy that we went to, but it was out in New York, and you actually go into a hot dog shop and you get your
Okay.
hot dog and you go into a phone booth. You pick up the phone, like the old fashioned phone booths, and you pick up the phone and you talk to
Uh-huh.
someone on the other end. And there's a small door inside the phone booth that opens up, and you walk right in, and boom, there's
Oh
the
wow, that's
speakeasy.
neat. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like I love speakeasies. I don't even care how like kitschy at this point that they are, but
Uh-huh.
I adore them.
Yeah. 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 It's fun. So that brings us to the most important question of the night. What are we drinking?
Ah, yeah. So, like I said, I'm stuck in 1920s era for certain things. This is a my rendition of a French 75, which is like a very popular drink back in the 20s, I believe, or 1800s, I think. I have to look that up again, but yeah. So I'm actually mixing it up a little bit with some Edgar Allan Poe, one of my favorite authors, because tis season, spooky season, and named it the Pale Blue 75 after his thrilling short story, The Telltale Heart. So I don't
Mhm.
know if anyone's familiar with that, but I hope everyone's got their recipes and follow along.
Yeah.
So
And I'll have
yeah,
the full recipe in the description. So anyone that's watching, all the
yay,
ingredients will be right there for you.
very cool. All right, so I do have my cheat notes here. Sorry,
Mhm.
because you
No,
see
no
me working
worries.
away. So we're
No
going
problem.
to get about 1.5 ounces of gin. Put that in the shaker right there. We need about 3/4 an ounce of fresh lemon juice. This is as fresh as going to get in this house right now.
Sure.
3/4, even though this is I believe this is a half, so we'll just do a little bit of that. You don't want it to be too lemony, especially with this. Like it has like extra stuff in it, so it'll be very
Mhm.
acidic. And we're gonna get the 3/4 of blueberry simple syrup. I cheated. This is actually Pedialyte. It's like a berry Pedialyte, so get your
Uh-huh.
hydration while you're
There you go.
dehydrating. Yeah,
Yeah,
healthy.
very good.
And let's get a little bit of ice cream in it. Normally, this drink is the French 75 is just done with the gin and lemon juice and regular simple syrup. Put that in the shaker. Now I'm praying that this shaker doesn't go insane on me. Where's my glass? Right here. Yeah, like it's like, whatever reason, when I put a drink in the shaker, you're shaking it, just like it's safe, and it just
Mhm.
floats up on you.
Sure.
Uh, voila. Well, it is not as pale blue as I wanted it to be, so we're just gonna add a little more color to it. That's good.
There you go. Very good. I love the glass too. The Eiffel Tower martini glass there.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
cool way to do it.
awesome.
Yeah.
You top it off with some champagne. kind of squeakiness. I hope you got your eyeball gum ball here.
Yeah.
And a little cocktail pick and just stick that right in there. It's your drink, so you can put your hands in it just like I'm doing right now. It's all good. Voila.
Voila.
75.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I love the little eyeball there too and everything. That's a nice touch.
Put a little strawberry fruit to represent the heart. If anyone's familiar with the story, you get extra points.
Very good. I'm sure a lot of people watching the show will be familiar with the story, so they should certainly appreciate that. So thank you for that.
So.
And I just have my customary whiskey in my wooden cup here. So
nice. Which whiskey are you drinking?
I went really easy today. I just have some Teelings, very like I like Irish whiskeys and Japanese whiskeys just to sip on. So probably the last dozen shows I've just been sipping on some. In fact, what I took to actually I should say that for this audience's sake here, but when we were at the Creatures, Crime, and Creativity Convention,
C3,
where we met, the C3, where we met, where we were doing this show, I guess a month and a half-ish ago, and I had brought a bottle of Irish Tears, which is an Irish whiskey, which, certainly writer themed. So it's always fun to kind of take that out to the Irish shows. So, but I also like drinking it because it's an Irish whiskey. So it's proved to be, I don't know, my curse, my salvation. I don't know, maybe both, but it's good stuff.
I think, it's pretty good whiskey.
Yeah. Awesome. So moving on from that, so I wonder then if maybe you could just tell us kind of about your author journey, like kind of what got you started leading up till today.
So it basically, I feel like it started when I can like form, sentences into an actual story itself. The earliest memory I have is back in 5th grade. We were essentially, I don't know if anyone remembers, like you get like spelling sheets and you get these like keywords and you use those keywords sort of like to create a story, just to make sure that you understand the context of the words. And just as my natural self, being raised on horror flicks and thrillers, I wrote like a short Halloween story. And my teacher at the time, Mrs. Courtney, down in South Street School from North New Jersey. I'm originally from Jersey, by the way. She was also very hard to impress, but a very cool teacher. And you don't realize how cool she is until you get older, right? You're just like, she just seems a little bit scary.
Sure.
And she was so impressed by my story that she started sharing it with like other teachers and the teacher's aide. And it was like, it sounds kind of conceited, like I was like sort of like the star of the show for at least a day at school.
Right.
And I love the feeling of being able to pull people into a world that's in my head, and sharing that with them and just seeing their reaction, whether like they're scared or they're just like, this is awesome, if they're avid horror readers or whatever have you. So that it stuck with me since then. Followed me all the way through high school, where it was mostly poetry, just kind of getting all the emotions out through poems. And essentially, in the beginnings of college and after I dropped off and started going after my master's in creative writing, one of the theses was to basically write a novel. That was actually the thesis, was to write a novel. And that was my first shot at writing a like 55,000 word novel.
Right.
It was a lot.
Sure.
But it didn't feel like a lot because I loved what I was doing. And it's funny to say that, right? Because it's been through an editing process for like forever. Now I'm just like, no.
Right. Very good.
Yeah, that's where the beginnings, like it started from the fifth grade story all the way into college and even up until now. It's during my um working on my master's with the Southern New Hampshire University. They really like push for you to sort of connect with the writing world, and I wasn't doing that. So joining all these conferences and meeting other writers and networking. Yeah, so what I was like, yeah, I can do this more than just like, hey, it's a hobby. I write poems and I write stories. I was like, no, I really want to, produce some of these things out there for other people to read. Yeah, the dream, right, is to be this like famous writer and make money off of it so that you don't have to work a 9 to 5. But at the same time, going to these conferences and meeting these other writers and sharing the love of writing with people, that is just that satisfying. And I'm with Courtney.
No, no, I don't
But
think
it's
so at
true.
all. Yeah, it's funny. I know nowadays too, and you work with younger people, so I'm sure you hear it a lot. But people say like corny. I feel like it's way overused now, right? Like it's like any sentimentality, any like being
Yeah.
joyful, like trying to be funny, and maybe
Hmm.
failing or maybe not failing, and it's like it's so corny, and like it's like such a sad thing. Like I think
I
it is
know.
cool. I think it's one of those things you have to find what works for you, right? Like I don't
Sure.
actually
Yeah.
like the little writer groups, but I know people that love those, right?
Hmm.
And to me, it's like when I'm writing, I kind of need to be in the lab. I'm kind of there, like so every morning. My writing desk actually is just right over here. I used to be right on the other side here. In fact, there's a video that they did of me, geez, 10 years ago, whatever it might have been now, where that's when I was writing on the bar all the time. And but right, so getting back to my point, I get stuck on the writing at the bar, and I was like, I really probably drank too much back then. I kid. Actually, I don't. I tried writing. I think I told this on the show, so I'll give the speed version. But I did try drinking while I was writing once, and I thought
Hmm.
like this was like the most brilliant things I've ever written. I'm like so like excited with myself, and the next day I read it, and it was utter garbage. And I'm like, nope, not happening again. I'm not.
I'm
The heavy
cracking
drinking
up
and
about
writing
that.
doesn't work.
I'm cracking up about that because so that happened to me. And like one of my first writing conferences, so of course,
Right?
like, everyone's networking at the bar. And at the time I'm working on my thesis, and I think I had to do like the second part of my thesis because like we were
Mm-hmm.
doing it in parts.
Sure.
And I think I don't recommend that, kids. Don't.
No. Exactly.
I and I and I was just like, wow, this is like, I'm typing, whatever. And I'm like, great, it's just flowing out of me, no problem, whatever, whatever. Uh Fast forward to turns out that the deadline for the project was like that Sunday night. And I was like, well, I didn't get a chance to like edit anything, but I was like, it's a rough draft. So let's just go ahead and send it in. No, no, don't ever, ever do that.
Right.
My professor was like, what in the world is happening here? It's just like, what are you doing here? And yeah,
Yeah.
it was no bueno, but I do not recommend. If you are going to do that for whatever
Right.
reason, one, it's not good for your liver. But if you are going to do that, make sure that you pre-read your stuff when you are not hungover and you are
Mhm.
totally sober and hydrated. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
It's funny.
terrible.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I think there's that relationship, right, with writers and drinking. Right? You go back to, I mean, there's so many examples, right? You just go back, Hemingway, etc. You kind of go down the list.
Mhm.
That there's probably multiple reasons for it. One is probably also there's probably just as much examples of writers who don't drink, and they just it
Mhm.
just
Oh
doesn't
yeah, yeah.
that doesn't become a story, right? Um, But I kind of get it, as in, like, the drinking lowers your inhibitions, right? And one of the things I think gets stuck as a writer, you can be very inhibited, right? And then it's hard to get
Mm-hmm.
anything down. Um, but it's just like when you're drinking and you're like, oh, I'm good to drive, but you're really not. Like, this is that
No.
you're not good to drive that story. I mean, I guess you could have, probably the same rule as driving, right? You can have that one drink in the 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever the usual guidance is, it'd probably be okay. But two drinks is probably too much, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think it also depends on the person and the drink, but at the same time,
sure.
it's just like you're not going to be murdering yourself or anyone on the road when you're just typing in your room. um, but yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot of writers that I actually love. I guess you would refer to them as contemporary writers because they're within our time. That that they don't drink. They're completely like sober and clean, which is like very cool. Like I do a lot of my mocktails and stuff like that, which is fine. To each his own. Everybody has a different journey. Everybody
Sure.
does like everything completely different from one another. But I don't knock it. Like I do drink on occasion. Um, and then most of the other times where it's just like, you get at a certain age where you're just like, I think I should start listening to my liver. Yeah. I
Right.
don't think I should. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That is true. I mean, I think it is one of those, with all things, right? There's a bit of, you got to figure out what works best for you. Right. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I get it. Like, I've had writers on this show that, I won't mention names, so I'm not sure if they would be comfortable with me saying, but that used
Yeah.
to be, drink a lot and
Yeah.
then don't drink anymore. And the writing overlaps that. And, don't think anyone's going to notice one or the other, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
not that they were drunk while they were writing, like we were just talking about, because that's
Right.
like, maybe that's like one thing, like everyone has to learn the hard way. Like, you do it, you're like, it's so great. And then you realize, no, that was
Like,
not great.
don't do that.
Brief interlude from the show. As you've heard me say ad nauseum at this point, the very best way to support the show is to buy a book. You're hearing all about my guest work during the show, so now if you want to take a moment to watch a cinematic trailer of one of mine, I'd certainly appreciate it. And if you're intrigued and so inclined, we'll have links where you can pick yourself up a copy. Thanks again, and cheers.
Are we bad people who sometimes do good things? Or good people who do bad things?
Very good. So then I wanted to um getting back to just to you a little bit here. So with the
Mhm.
okay, I'm gonna see if I can actually nail saying it this time, because I think I have the sound. The Bomba Dancing.
Well, bomba.
Bomba. Okay.
Bomba.
I
There you
have to
go.
say
Yeah.
things like 90 times before I'll have it
Sure.
right.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. Um, So with that, I wonder if just from the storytelling perspective, right? Because I'm not a dancer, although I tell my wife all the time that like dancers dance, so I dance, and she's like, you shouldn't dance. You're a writer, you should go write. Leave the dancing to the dancers. But there's like the story, right? That dancing can tell a story and things. Is there any relationship with, or have you learned anything from kind of the art or the storytelling of dancing that you apply to like your poetry or your fiction writing, or are they kind of mutually exclusive things? Or
No, actually, it's particularly to Bomba Dancing. Just really in case people are not familiar with what that is. It's actually a folk dance from Puerto Rico. It's one of our it could be I could be describing it like but it's a folk dance from Puerto Rico. It derives from our African ancestors, and there are particular steps and ways of going about doing it. And I do actually have like one or two scenes in my first novel that brings in the Bomba dancing, because that's my big connection with my culture, with my Puerto Rican culture. I'm very used to that, is how I connect with it aside from the food that we eat. But I'm very musical. Like I love to dance. I love to hear music. I'm listening to music as I'm writing, watching other, like I'll watch YouTube videos of other combat dancers, and it's very like cathartic and spiritual for me at the same time. And so I love including that stuff into my writing, because like not only does it give a beautiful prose to body and soul and spirit and words, but it also connects with the culture that I'm trying to bring about in my writing. Um, I'm not a flamenco dancer, but I do have like a poem. It's actually an ode to my grandmother, who, part of her family comes from Spain, and she was always very into like, the Spaniard culture and the flamenco dancers and such. And so I did write a poem for her, and it actually has to do with a flamenco dancer, and essentially the countdown of the way the flamenco dancers count at the very end of the poem follows that. Um, so yeah, I do, like, without realizing that, I was like, oh yeah, I do incorporate dancing into my poetry, because I don't know, it helps me to connect spiritually and emotionally into my writing.
Right. Well, I mean, I can see it. For a while, there's kind of two things that kind of that touched me. There was one is like that spiritual connection to it. I know it's gotten like, we were joking, like I think it was kind of pre-show, or maybe it was the very start of the actual show here. We were talking about everything being corny, right? Oh, this is corny, or that's corny. But I do feel like the current, I know the current zeitgeist is like, oh, well, don't have a revelation in your poetry or your writing. Like you leave that out, leave it for the reader. And, don't it used to be called, or maybe they still call it, like the transcendental, right? The things that are kind of like the above, right? That could be God, that could just be spirit, like however, wherever you want to take it, but that kind of greater than the base human experience. And I feel like it gets lost nowadays. Like we don't like to talk about like truth or beauty and things, and those kind of that spirit and all of that. So I love that you connect it with that dance and everything. I think that's really lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I can see too is the beat of it, right? Like you have like your poetry has the beats, the movement to the form, to the words. So yeah, I can see that connection completely.
Yeah, I feel like it's the flow of it. I mean, as a Gothic writer too, like not just in poetry, but using prose, it, it it's flowery language. It does have a flow to it. It sounds certain. I don't know how to explain it, but you have your like alliteration, you have like
Mhm.
certain words that connect with each other that sounds like a beat or a rhythm of some sort. Um,
Right.
yeah, so I agree with you. I feel like a lot of writers who are like horror writers tend to use something in regards to that so that at least they could get the pacing to the tension.
Yeah.
So yeah, I only read horror, but I should open I should open like to other things. I try to once in a blue moon, but it's always leaning over to horror. But that's what I noticed is that they do use certain words, and it comes off like a beat or a rhythm that at least gets you to the tension of
Mhm.
what they're trying to represent, like to freak you out or whatever.
Right. Right. No, and I think movies were a detriment to writing to a degree. Is that one? I mean, they became kind of the dominant art form, and so,
Hmm.
but I think, and so that took some people away that maybe would have spent more time reading. But the detriment I'm really getting at is that there's kind of a school of writing that tries to
Hmm.
mimic movies, right? It tries to be like it's just
Um,
it's just the camera lens, and it lets you in. Um, and then so it's like, oh, I don't like writing that sounds like writing, right? And
yeah.
I want to be careful because like I think that could work perfectly well for someone in their particular stories. And there's writers I admire that I've had on the show that I think
Sure.
highly of that think that. But I always think like, but you're what's great about writing is the writing, is the meter you can put into it, is the turns of phrases, all of that. That in a movie, right, you don't have that narration, so you don't get that chance to really
Yeah.
dig into someone's head. Like you had mentioned that you get to invite someone into your world, right? You get to invent this
Hmm.
world and invite them in. And the real like alchemy, and the real beauty of like literature is that so you do that and you've invited them in, but then also the act of them doing it's created in their mind now, right? And they're making this new world, they're filling in those little gaps
Hmm.
that that you didn't provide, and it becomes something wholly unique to each reader. Whereas a movie, yeah, you have different impressions of things, but it's still a screen. There's still soundtrack. There's still it's not as internalized. So I always think that when
Yeah.
people do that with writing, I'm like, well, but you're letting go of some of these awesome tools, like these awesome things you can do. So, and how you could use the writing itself to build tension or
I know.
reveal character traits, whatever, and so forth.
Yeah. And it's funny because I like I understand the purpose of setting, when you're writing, but when there's like a page and a half of setting, and it's
Right.
weird, right? Because it's weird as a Gothic writer for me to say that, right? Because normally we're describing things to like on end, and I'm just like, hey, just get on with the story. Like I'm more of a
Yeah.
like I love characterization. I love knowing the personality traits, what makes them tick, like
Mhm.
set the tension, but I'm just like, I don't want to know the specific red color that the velvet drapes are, like
Right.
unless, it kind of like weaves its way into the form of the plot itself. I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
but that's just me, right? We have
Yeah.
writers who do that, and it's like sometimes I admire it to the point where I'm just like, damn, why can't I write like that? Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, you're right. Like every even like with the readers, when people are reading your stuff, whether you're pulling them into your world, they're like you said, they are adding bits and pieces that's familiar to them in some ways. And I think that's the beauty of like
Mhm.
writing and reading. It's almost like a actually, it's kind of like Bomba. Bomba, the music for Bomba is a call and response. And I feel like reading or writing is the same way. The writer
Mhm. Sure.
writes certain things and the reader has to interpret it and maybe call back to it, but they'll be calling back to it in their own way.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That was really a cool correlation there. It's funny too, because when you think about it, right, there's so many details you could prospectively give, right?
Mhm.
And so when you put too much, right? So if the setting is really important to what you're trying to get across, okay, then maybe you need to spend a little time on it. But if it's
Mhm.
not, you're giving all those details, and really what was important was what this character was, thinking or seeing, or maybe how they think about that setting, versus just blanketly how it looks. You can get lost in the details, really easy. It just becomes like, okay, here's a bunch. I'm not sure what's important. And I'm gonna later on, when I need to know that important detail that would have like maybe shocked me or create a reveal or whatever it might have been, I'm not going to remember because you
Yeah.
gave me too much. But um,
Yeah.
I had on Kier Graff. He writes with another writer. They do a lot of collaborations under Linda Kier. Linda Jaffe
Mhm.
Hull is the other writer. But he was on, and we were talking. And he had he was a professor in college, if I remember right. And he wrote something, and he goes, "Oh, this is like so great." He gives it to her, and it's like it's so detailed or something. And she's like, "Oh, you know what a mimetic fallacy is?" And he didn't. I didn't know as he was telling me the story either, right? And she's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." So those were passing along knowledge now, But she was like, "Oh, so that is when something, let's say it's mundane or kind of boring, and then you describe it in a mundane and boring kind of way." She's like, if you want to describe this, maybe this is you need to just make it a little more interesting for me as the reader to kind of stick with. And I'm a very impatient reader and writer, so I don't usually fall into that. I'm describing something for an hour if I describe it very particular intense with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I can see that completely. I was like, oh, and I think sometimes now when I'm reading something or something, I think back to that conversation and go, oh, these should have the mimetic fallacy there.
That's funny. I've never heard that term. So yeah. I'm learning something here, but it's just my brain gets I get impatient. I just kind of like started getting into like fantasy genre.
Okay.
That's so much. And I love
Yeah.
that writers do that, right? Because it shows the dedication they had to their world, where just like all of that world built up, all of the magic systems, like everything. But my brain's like, no, this is a lot. So normally I had to listen to them on Audible because it's just too much information for me to retain via like reading on the book. Because my brain, it's like pulling bits and pieces and trying to like create a movie of the book itself, and I'm just like, I can't. I can't. Just like it's too much.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because I love fantasy too. I don't know if I have. Well, I have Mothman behind me here, but usually there's a nice, or there's a knight up there. But and I actually have a dragon skull. Like I mean, it's not a real dragon skull, obviously, but there's a dragon skull that's a permanent resident on the bar, kind of right over here. In fact, actually, he's decorated for Halloween. So as we film, we're a few days before Halloween, so I always have the dragon there, and he gets dressed up for the different holidays, and hangs out.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so I love fantasy too. But you're right, though. Sometimes it can, it's
a lot.
It's cool. Sometimes I know a lot of their readers love it. But sometimes I really can't help but think like, you've described like what they're reading 96 times now. Like I can't, maybe next time you just give me like a sentence kind of flair, and I have all that back stuff that I really can kind of carry with me to it. But sometimes you're going with the conventions of your genre, and they like long books, so you give them long books, So
yeah, exactly. I'm just like, wow, that's awesome. That's a lot.
So getting back to your book, the one you wrote in the MFA, because I think you said you're working on editing it now
for like the umpteenth time. Yeah. My God, I love it, and I have a love-hate relationship with it, and I hate saying that I have a hate relationship with it, but if I'm being honest, I gave it to a good friend of mine, and I believe you interviewed her fiance, Vaughn Jackson.
Oh,
Stephanie
sure.
Pierce, she's the editor, but I gave it to her so that she could read it and give me notes. And she gave me great notes on it, even to the point where like I'm probably bringing back a specific character that was killed off, and to the point where I may be doing an absolute rewrite of the
Uh-huh.
novel. But she gave me this stuff in January, and I'm finally now kind of like, you know,
Right.
it's kind of like getting back with that ex where you're just like, things are great, in the
Yeah.
beginning, and then it just like fell off for a little bit. And I don't know, we should be like seeing each other again, but
Yeah.
what the hell? It's just
That's
like,
funny. Yeah.
um, yeah, I love it. And I look behind me because like I have it over here.
Okay.
Just to, but it's definitely the editing process. My goodness, someone should just definitely collect like a basket full of things for a writer that they know this is what you should do. If you have any author friends and they're in the editing process for your novel for like the fifth, sixth, or whatever time, put them with a care basket. We're gonna need it. We're gonna
Right.
we're gonna need it. Just
Mhm.
send them chocolates or whatever their favorite snacks are.
Right, right. The chocolates, the stress ball in there. You can just squeeze that
Yeah.
stress ball around and
Or a gift card to a rage room so they can break things. Yeah.
right.
Whatever for them to get through it, because it's a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's so much, and it sucks because it's like, you it's a different love. At the beginning of your draft, you're absolutely in awe, and you're writing it, and even after like maybe the first or two times of editing it, you're just like, I'm loving this, and then it's just like
Mm-hmm.
so many suggestions and edits and opinions, and you kind of want to take a lot of them with a grain of salt, of course, because it is your book, but at the same time, some suggestions and feedback are great.
Right.
Um, but it's just, whew, it's a process. We're gonna get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get there. It's gonna happen.
It will happen. You'll get
Yeah.
cross that or I don't know. It's a finish line. It's almost like getting to the top of a mountain, right? And,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I think of it a lot of times as sculpting, right? It's like,
Mhm.
it's like you get that first draft, a rough draft, whatever you want to call it, for zero, vomit draft, whatever, you get something there, you have some materials, and then you're just stuck, sculpting that
Yeah.
thing until you get to that final form that you were thinking of. Or I don't know, sometimes I think like there's just a moment where you accept that you're done talking about it. It's almost like you're talking about like the ex, right? And you get
Yeah.
those arguments where sometimes you both just accept that we're just done talking about this, we're just gonna
Uh-huh.
be quiet.
Yeah.
Sometimes with like a story thing, sometimes it's like, okay, no, I'm just ready to kind of be quiet now. Like, there's
Mhm.
all kinds of things you could always look at it. I wish I could tweak that or this or that sentence, especially with like short stories, like poetry, things like that, where it's like every
Yeah.
word matters so much. So I always like, I'll look at my old, I think the short story book is the one behind me. Sometimes when I do a reading, I pull that out and I'm like, oh, I really wish. Actually, I think this is the copy where I have pencil in there, and
Oh,
I'm
really?
reading it out loud, and it's like really like when I say this out loud for it to come out this way, and
Mm.
um, so it
Even
could
in
be a
its final
never-ending
form.
process, even in its final form. Yeah.
Good grief. Oh. I
Yeah.
say that because like I had my poetry book, I would look back on it and I was just like, shit, I should have changed that. It's just like it's already out there. Just let it go.
Right.
Let
Yeah.
it go.
Yeah. As the book I've been working on, I'm just about done. It's done, but not, done at this moment. But I was going through and It's Pirates of Appalachia. It's because I think I mentioned this at C3, but I'm a West Virginia
Okay.
boy. I was born in Morgantown.
Yeah.
And so anytime we go back, we were like, okay, Austin Camacho invited me out for the convention, do the show. And so me and my wife, the lovely Claire, we come out and I was like, okay, let's go. We'll visit West Virginia, kind of hang out. Then we'll go visit. A lot of my family is actually in Western Pennsylvania. So we kind of spent a lot of time like Western West Virginia, Northern West Virginia, and, Pennsylvania. But we did go to the Mothman Museum actually, which is quite pleasant,
Oh, cool.
which was
That's
was a
awesome.
good drive, but it's a fun. Your area is fun to drive in because we did hit some of the DC traffic when we were out, the Baltimore traffic a little bit out, but it's nothing like when we were driving. That was nothing like LA traffic. I'm sure it can get bad at different times. LA traffic's just bad kind of all of the time. And then there's no pretty trees and things to see, so it's just concrete jungle. There's mountains. I do like that we're right next to the mountains. I like the mountains, but otherwise it's concrete jungle. So we were driving on the way to C3. We hit some traffic, and usually I'd be like all stressed about just being in traffic, even if like we had plenty of time. And but then I was like, oh, nice trees. I gotta look at the forest. I can look in.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll see a bird. There's a hawk floating around here I can stare at. But so I've been working on that book, forever. It's basically it's a epic absurdist satire, and it's about these like bootlegging buccaneers who decide to sail down the Ohio River to sack this like future Pittsburgh, and this world has gone completely crazy, right? And so I forget how long it is, but it could be whoever decides to publish it, or maybe decides to publish it, could break it into 1 or 2 books pretty easily. But it was this book I felt like I had to write before I died. And I hope I don't die soon. I'm still fairly young to not die, hopefully. But it was like this utter compulsion. I have to write this thing, but it's so long that it's just like, oh my gosh. And now I was like, okay, I need to go through one last time, just start to finish, just make sure the continuity is good. Kind of, I always make little notes for myself, make sure I either disregarded them. But I kept trying to tell myself, like, okay, this is good enough stage. Like, I can't start haggling over this little piece of language here that, a year from now I could look at and want to haggle over again. It's good enough stage. Get the content all good and go on from there.
Yeah, and that's the scary part too, because like even after you're like, I'm satisfied with this, and you do, let's say, luckily, hopefully, get a publisher, and they'll turn around and be like, hey, so you're just like, no, don't put me through this shit again.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I know I had Revis Wortham on it. He was talked about that. His first book he wrote was, I forget what the word count was. It was like 120,000 words, but they like him to be around 90,000. Oh, wow. And so they're like, can you go cut 30,000 words? Then he did, it moved on, but it's like I could see like the core of that,
Yeah.
I think that happened with King's The Stand. I think it was the same. They ended up re-releasing it after he got big, but it's so long. But you try to that's the silly thing about silly from a professional standpoint. Depending on how you want to take it, right? I think there's writers there's probably more than this buckets, but there's kind of like the hobbyist, right? And I have no problem with any of these, right? But there's certain people that just, I like to write a little bit. I write some poetry, maybe, write some stories, maybe write a novel here or there. And it's just, it's like golf, right? You could love to do it, be really passionate about it, but it's also not like I'm trying to make a living off of it or anything,
Yeah.
There could be the professionals, or they're trying to be professional, where it's kind of like, oh, you try to write a book every year because that's kind of what you have to do. But then I think there's more of the artsy fartsy kind of writers. And I say artsy fartsy, I'd put myself in this category, which is these are the things I just have to write from a personal level or else I'll explode, So that's what it was. I'm like, okay, well, I should just be writing more. I can write another short story collection. I can write another novel. I do the shorter novel, like, get a lot of singles out, get a lot of good work out. And then hopefully at some point, then it's okay, now I can write this passion project. But I'm like, no, I have to write the passion project right now or else I'm going to explode. So that's where.
Yeah. I know. And it's just like, and it boggles the mind of like, I like usually when I'm on social media and I see like writers posting memes about how they're working on one project, but like 10 other ideas just start popping up into their brain. It's just like, why are we like this? Why? Why? Like, why? Like, it's just like, this is great right at the beginning. You're doing it and you're working through it, and then you're starting to like kind of lag off just a little bit, and you're just like, let me work on my next project. That's me. That's where I fall under. It's like, I'm gonna do this story and this story. I have like so many bits and pieces of stuff, but yeah, that novel, The Amber Within, it's supposed to be book one of at least two more or three more books. Just have these like crazy ideas of a connection of families and ancestral spirits and just, the roots and everything. And that's why I'm just like, I've already written like a big chunk of the book two rough draft at the beginning of this year when I was out actually in Antigua for vacation, and just because of like the character that I was creating and the Caribbean and all of that, I was just like, I'm just gonna sit at this cafe looking out at the beautiful scenery and just start, writing. But even after having like book two done, and then like book three is like, calling out for me as well. Book one's like, but you have to finish me first. You have to finish me first.
Right.
Like, we can't just like, we need to be done with this because it's an intricate part of the puzzle.
Sure.
This started off with, and it's just like, oh my god. Okay. Let's see. We're gonna do the song and dance again.
Right. That's funny. It reminds me, like, I used to think, because I haven't written any series, I have one idea maybe down the line of the list here of ideas I want to go over, but that might be a series. But I've always thought, because again, I'm at that artsy fartsy side. I was a director for our quality regulatory department until about 4 months ago now. And I've been, podcasting and like writing and things full time at this point. But so there's a very professional bent in me. I'm also like, we're West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, like with family upbringing, like you work hard. You also don't talk about it. So I seem like I don't work hard when I do things because I like to, have a good time with things. But like, there's just don't talk about it. Go do your work,
Right.
So there's a very like hardworking aspect of it, but then there's also the like, oh, but this hard work when it's the writing that has to be for the passion play. And I've always thought like, oh, if I write a series, what I'm going to do, and this is silly, kids don't do this, but this is my idea. Like I write a series, I'm going to write the whole series before I publish any of them. So that then when I want to tweak, I can tweak everything. Like when you write like a novel, oh, now I can go back and this character's going to stay alive now. Things. So I'm like, I would just write the whole thing out and write it while I'm writing my other things, which depends what you're doing, right? I know some writers do work on multiple things. I say I've been working on Pirates for, what is it? I think it's somewhere in the order of like 13 years or something. But I also wrote, what is it? A Fire for Christmas. It's a anthology of kind of satirical Christmas stories. But it's a solid, fat book. And there's 5 different short stories and things. I wrote that in between all of that. But the short stories, like poetry, I can kind of see like, okay, I'm working on this, and then you can have this longer project over here. The idea of actually keeping the series and being a working writer is probably not wise, kids, but you get these
I
funny
know.
notions, though, when you're not the one doing it yet. So
Yeah. And then there's like the people who like just pump out so much. They're just like, I'm got this published. I'm coming out with this. I'm coming out with that. And coming out, it's just like, how? I know you have a full-time job. How are you doing this? Please tell me how. Because it's just like it's rough because you don't want to compare yourself to other people, but at the same time, you put yourself in this weird timeline where like I need to get this done, right? Where it's like it's goal setting or kind of just setting yourself up for uh pulling yourself further down into the writer depression, I guess you would say. Right? It's just like, okay, we have goals. We set goals for ourselves. We're gonna finish it at this time and this day and then blah blah blah. And it's just like you're looking at the calendar. It's 5 months past that, and you're just like, I haven't even looked at my novel, But it happens to the best of us. Like everyone's always working on something, and like you said, we have like our passion projects. I guess the Amber Within is my passion project. Like I as much as I loathe the process of editing, I still love that book. So it's not so much that I loathe the book, but I just it's trying to get those ideas together, and it's just like, oh, we're doing this rewrite. It's gonna be a lot. But I agree with you, that whole like thinking about, I have a series, everything needs to be connected perfectly, especially if you're writing a period piece. You just have to make sure the timeline is good.
Right.
Because once you put it out there and you can't, like,
Right.
that's just like off by like one era. Like, so.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's funny because you do that. Like I think of it a lot. Is it's cool to have goals, like have milestones, but I think depending on what you're doing, right? Like, so what I tried to do with Pirates at one point is I want to make progress every day. And so that then it didn't get to like, okay, well, I didn't get 1,000 words. It was like, no, but I sat down, I spent my time, I got, I did my daily work. And not saying you can't take days off. I think sometimes people get a little crazy with that writing advice. Like, you must do it every day. It's like, oh, like any other job, you can take the weekend off. Like, it's okay. Like, let your body and mind kind of recover here. But that's what I tried to do, is go, okay, just progress versus milestones. Like, there's milestones, getting this next part done. I'll be done with the milestone. And now it's a little easier because I can go, okay, well, I'm going to go through 2 chapters today. And that's not like an unreasonable amount to do because I'm just kind of feeding in some notes. I like to read everything out loud all the time. Ever since that I was doing a reading one time that started that copy with the pencil all through it. And that was like, oh, I used to not read this out loud. So every day now I'm over there like reading out loud. And mostly it's just me in the house during the day. But sometimes people come, they're like, did you say something? Or it's funny because I always know like something's funny to me if I forget about it when I come back to it. When I read it, I'm kind of surprised. I'll laugh at myself. And I'm usually kind of self-loathing, but I'm like, oh, okay, well, I did well there. And I'll laugh over here, or I'll be upset or something if it's, conversely, if it's something supposed to be sad or something, like, what are you doing over there? And I'm like, sleep, baby. Bring me a hanky. We'll be fine.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, right? Where like you don't realize how much of the emotions you're pulling out of yourself as you're writing. Because depending on the scenes that you're writing.
Yeah.
I bawled so much. Not because of the editing process, but because like just going through the scenes again, like it's kind of like reliving a fictional trauma. It's so weird. It's so weird, but I feel like a lot of writers connect with their stories in that way, where it's just like you're pouring, even if it's fictional, you're still pouring like your emotions into it, in hopes that you get the same reaction from your audience. or something. But yeah, you're right. Like the laughing and the crying out loud or whatever, like it can really just like throw a person off that just comes in like, what are you doing? Nothing, just reading my stuff.
Or I'll have like crazy questions sometimes too. Like I forget because so Claire and I have been married. I think we figured it out the other day. It's 14 years.
Okay.
And I always go, I don't know. Somehow I get it mixed up. Our son's 13. I was like, we've been married 13 years. She's like, no, it's 14. It's always one more like year than he's been around. I'm like, what? But there's the what was it, that Tinder or whatever where you swipe, and I was just
yeah
saying something in a story kind of like, it's a satire, right? I'm satirizing basically everything I can find, and I wanted to like, I'll talk about swipe right or left, but I've never been on Tinder or any of these things, right? So I go over, and I think my wife and our daughter Michaela and our son William is over there. My family's very unique with names, so if you know my name, you know my son's name and my grandfather's name, my dad's name, and a bunch of other dead Williams names. But I was like, hey, is it like, do you swipe left when something's good, or do you swipe right when it's good? And they're like, what are you doing over there?
Like, are you on Tinder?
Yeah, exactly. Are you dating apps over there? You sure you want to talk about this in front of mom? We're like, no, work on the story. They're like, should have known. Clickety clack, clickety clack, tickety clack. Ding. Oh, hello. You caught me right as I was putting the finishing touches on my epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia. And now it is time for the long road to publication and the long editing process. As writers, we spend tons of time editing our work. The hardest part, I think, of the editing process is really like the proofreading, the copy editing, because you were so immersed in it. I've just spent 13 years immersed in Pirates, got it all together, went through, edited it front and back, by characters, all these different asymmetrical ways, and still it's going to have typos in it. And they're going to horrify me one day if I ever find those in the actual printed edition. The way I combat that is with Edit GPT. You found today's sponsor. The link is on the screen now. I'm going to put it here. Here's the link. If you're on the podcast forum and you can't see me pointing up at that link, if you're on a podcast, you're really missing out. I'm really animated with my hands. But if you can't find it on there, feel free. You'll find it in the description. It helps support the show. It helps restock the bar. Helps keep this guy happy so that we can keep putting all these shows out there for all of you. Thanks for everything. Let's get back to the writing, because Pirates of Appalachia is not going to finish itself. The one thing Edit GPT cannot do is save the file for you. So I'm going to make sure to save that now. So I want to get back to my work. You get back to your regularly scheduled programming. So, and I know you said you're a big Edgar Allen Poe fan, and you like the Gothic kind of writing style. So, wonder if you could maybe we could talk about that for a minute. Like, what is it about Poe that screams out to you, and take it from there?
Sure. Harkening back to writing poetry, right? And also loving horror films. I kind of feel like without knowing who Poe was, I was privy to like watching a lot of the Vincent Price movies where they've done like The Raven and all of that. And I had no idea who that writer was until I was involved with so it was part of like the debate team with high school, except we weren't debaters. We were more of reciters, and I had to recite something by memory, and mine just so happens to be The Telltale Heart. And I was just like, oh, this sounds familiar. Like the writing just seemed familiar to some of the movies that my mom used to have me watch with her. And turns out like I started reading up on the writer, and I just got hooked right away, right? Because you have like the beauty of his writing, the way he uses the words. Again, we're talking like prose, this alliteration, the way he's just able to stack things in such a way where there's a tense buildup, but it also sounds beautiful. It's beautifully horrifying, and I've been hooked since then. So that's what I love about Poe, and actually that's what I love about most Gothic writers. It's just it's the Victorian language. So of course they use like several words to describe one particular emotion. You know,
Sure.
and it's just I don't know. There's just like a beauty to it, but there's like a beauty to the psychological horror. As humans, that we're all just kind of like there's something there when there's like a nervous tick of some sort, or for like the main extreme people where why exactly like in the Telltale Heart, why did that guy ended up killing the old man? And it was because like over an eye, like the eye was driving him crazy. And it's just like, wow, it seems far-fetched, but it's not, right? Because you hear about these terrible things that happen to other people caused by people who were just snapped or what have you. And I don't know. I think there's not that there's a beauty in the violence or in any of the killings, anything like that, but there's a beauty in the human psyche, the fragility of that, the impermanence of our psyche, that like it could just happen to any one of us. So I think that's what hooked me on Poe as well.
Right. Right. Well, when I had Vaughn on, we had talked about horror a little, and you talked about like the catharsis of it, and it really strikes me. It's almost the Greek tragedies, right, where it'd be like horrific thing, and you'd go and it was to reach catharsis and thing. I feel like that is kind of transitioned into the horror. I don't always love the word genre; it's where you put it on the bookshelf, but that kind of like Gothic, kind of the horror aspect to where you can face that terror, but you get to face it in your couch, right? Or you're sitting on your couch, or you get to face it and actually get to experience those emotions and connect with this very human part of you. And even with those transcendental things, right? What happens when we die? Why is this, how can a soul go so awry that we end up killing someone? But do it in a place that's safe enough that we get a chance to experience that aspect of humanity, and hopefully never touch that in real life, but then also it is around us, right? I mean, true. I think there was something like there's 5 million podcasts and it's 25% are true crime. I think there's that aspect of it. It's like, you're kind of fascinated by the macabre and those things that scare us. But I think that there's a lot of beauty there. I agree with you. I don't think the word is misplaced at all. It's not beauty as in pretty,
Right.
but it is beauty as in though you're coming across real human emotions, and that catharsis can be really valuable. I think that's actually I think that's why I like so much. And I don't know. I'm also kind of like I hit like the attention span of a fruit fly. So like, oh, boy, oh, this or that. Oh, this is an interesting, bright, shiny thing. Exactly. Well, I think it's like when you you like the horror, but I think sometimes it's like, oh, if you only oh, I just like something to escape. I'm just going to escape to the Western. I'm just reading Westerns. Not that Westerns can't have that. So, because you could certainly have like Unforgiven or something where you get a lot of real human emotions out of it. But the truly escapism kind of stuff, you can get that, and that's fine. There's probably times where you really need that. You have a tough day, you just need something to kind of get your mind off of it and recuperate, right? But sometimes I think you need to face those things. I think that actually is going to make you a happier person, a more adjusted person, than if you just shy away from it completely.
And I think like what makes it safe, so to speak, it's also not just because like, you're not actually living it, but also there's an end to it, right? Like once the story's over, that's it. Like you're not, there's an end to that in the books and in the movies, as opposed to in real life where unfortunately, the horror still lives on traumatically in such a way. And I think, yeah, that the a lot of people, or at least for me, watching a horror film or reading horror is comforting. Because there's usually an end, and
Mhm.
I noticed that I tend to lean more into the stories where there is some sort of justice
Mhm.
by nature that occurs when a horror happens. There is just something there that, not just this horrific thing has happened, but also that there's a glimmer of hope that either your spirit or nature itself is gonna, provide the karma or take vengeance for you, whatever it is. So
Mhm.
those are the things I lean more into because I don't know, it gives me like a glimmer of hope. So I think that's why I like supernatural movies, like the whole like
Mhm.
evil versus good type thing,
Mhm.
and good sort of wins out.
Sure.
Um, yeah, it's definitely, yeah, you're right. It is definitely catharsis. Like it's just, oh, let's just watch horror movies all day today.
All right. Yeah. Well, and you also get to
Okay.
step away anytime you need to, right? And in like real
Mhm.
life, you're going through something you don't get to just, I mean,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
always get to just step away from what might be ailing you in life. But when you have a book or you have a movie, okay,
Mhm.
well, it's going to end, and then also if it's too much, you can just turn it off and go about your
Exactly.
night.
Yeah, um, so I hang out with like Vaughn and Stephanie a lot, and usually like when we're watching horror or we like pick a horror film, we always try to look for the trigger warnings because we know individually like what it is that we're able to handle, right?
Sure.
And just some things like we won't, touch or we won't watch. And I feel like it's the same thing with my rating. Like some things I
Hmm.
won't read, but that's, particular to the person. Everyone has
Hmm.
something completely different. That's just a bit too much for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then getting back to Poe just a little bit, because I think one of his favorite quotes was, and I'm going to butcher it. And maybe if you know it better than me, feel free to correct me. But I think it's about short stories, and it was basically like the whole goal is to get to like that singular emotion. But do you know the
I
quote I'm
don't
talking
remember
about?
the shoot, I don't see like
Um,
I'm a Poe fan, but don't quiz me on Poe.
that's what the whole shot section is going to
You
be
know, let's
Poe quizzing. Yeah, don't have it here.
I mean we
Um,
could try it. But yeah.
no, it's. I'm kidding, but then yeah, that was the thing. So the idea was that like yeah, you're right. What you're writing, the goal is to kind of create a singular emotion, in the reader. And
Yeah.
however he had phrased that, the singular emotion is that's the quote. I remember that phrase, but the leading to it, I think I'm butchering a little, but so when you're writing, I know the novel's still in progress. But for like the poems, like short stories, anything like that, how do you get to that? Like, do you identify what the emotion is that you want the reader to feel? Do you just write the story and then after kind of look at it? Like, how do you go about that process?
So for my poetry, um the singular emotion is what I'm feeling. And essentially is like I feel like with poetry it's different for me because I'm conveying this is me, uh, like wholeheartedly. This is me, this is how I feel, this is how I think, and you get to read it. If you get the same feeling, awesome. You get something different, great. But it's like my purpose is not to have them feel what I'm feeling or just to kind of like see what I feel, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
But in my stories, that's completely different where like I know I want them to feel a certain way. Um, I wrote a short story and actually just got published in Beyond the Bounds of Infinity, which is the anthology that Vaughn Jackson and Stephanie Kerr had edited. And it has to do with this cosmic horror. It has to do with like a Taino, um, Taino Indian from Puerto Rico who is facing off this entity that represents colonialism and patriarchy and all of those things. And what I want the reader to feel is rebellion. The rebellious nature to just do whatever it is that you need to do in order to fight that off. And so, that's kind of like I know the story I want to tell, and I want the person to feel what the main characters feel. I usually write in a lot of first person, and it's just like, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and this is what you need to feel after the story's over. But of course, like, you have like that singular emotion, but within certain scenes, you don't want them to feel that way all the way through, because then it's just like, it's not really scary. The tension is not really there. It's just like,
sure.
this person's going to fight, period. But at the tail end of it, yes, I want you to feel rebellious. I was telling people, like, citing the short story, like, take the leap, because this is essentially what, the main character ends up, doing. And it conveys so much more than just like taking an actual leap of faith, but like it's there in the literal sense as well. And is that like connecting that with like the rebellious nature of a lot of the Indians that have been people right back in history with like in Puerto Rico when Columbus came, and how the Tainonians were dealt with and what they've done in order to pull away or get away from the horrors that was, inflicted upon them. So yeah, with that short story, it was just like, yes, I want you to be scared, but at the end, I want you to have hope, and I want you to feel rebellious. And I feel like that's kind of a lot of our like writing in general. It's just a lot of what I was saying about horror, right? That I tend to lean into things where it's just like, yeah, it's scary, something terrible happened, but there's a glimmer of hope that whether the person or nature itself, gives the villain its, comeuppance. And yeah, so I guess I want people to rebel. Be rebels. Be rebels all the time,
Yeah, sure. Well, I like about it too is like, and I think that was what Poe was saying. I don't think he meant like the whole time just have emotion, but it's like it evokes it. This is kind of I think he was specific to short stories, if I remember right. But I'll try to find. I'll put it in the description down there for anyone watching. I'll quote them properly or put a link to someone that quotes them properly. There's if you feel that same way the entire time through, yeah, it cloys, right? It gets exhausting. So it's just like, I'm just going to yell at you the whole time. Well, okay, well now your yelling doesn't mean anything,
Right.
So I can see that completely. So thank you for that. So I think then it's time for a very important segment of the show I like to call shots. So so you're familiar. Will be a tad more here questions than at C3. But are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, very good. All right, and because you had told me that you're such a horror fan, kind of beforehand of things, so a lot of these are going to be Halloween themed. Or at least horror movie Halloween themed, kind of in that aspect of things. So, Freddy, Jason, Chucky, or that girl, I couldn't find her name, that crawls out of the TV screen.
Oh, Samara.
Is that okay? Who you got? Who's the scariest?
Who's the scariest? The girl definitely comes out of the TV screen. I've had nightmares like that before I saw the movie. And watching the movie, I was like, what the hell?
There's something primal about that, isn't there? So I don't know. There is.
Yeah, Japanese horror films are amazing. Like I love Japanese horror films, but I was just like you're watching it, and while I was watching it, it's just like I've had I've had like the nightmares where like the TV just wouldn't change no matter what channel, or when I cut it off, it would still come on.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, definitely the Crow film, The Grudge. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable?
Oh, not seen anything. But I've had we talked about my family and C3, like, we tell like horror stories that have happened. I had something happen to me in the place that we used to live on, Titchener Street. And didn't realize how creepy it was until like years later when we moved out of there and I'm already living in Maryland. But short of it is that I used to take naps in the living room on the couch, and on two separate occasions, I woke myself up laughing in this deep laughter, like it was like someone else's voice, like a man's voice. And it freaked me out. Right. So like after 2 times, I was just like, I'm never standing. This is freaky. Why does that happen to me? Whatever. All right. Fast forward to like maybe 10 years later. We're around the bonfire, my brother's house. They live out on the Poconos, and we're just, families hanging out around the bonfire and to start telling scary stories. And my brother starts talking about how when they lived in that apartment, so my brother's bedroom used to look out into the living room, and his bed definitely looked directly out into the living room. And he said one night he woke up in the middle of the night and he saw like a man in on the couch just laughing. And when he said that, like every tingle that you could think of, just like when I was just like, hey. And I ended up telling him what happened to me, and we're just like, all right, that's it. Then like put out the fire. Right? It's like, let's go watch some cartoons.
I believe that.
It was so weird. Like we've had with my brothers particularly and my mom have witnessed a lot more things than I have at that apartment in Titchener Street, but that has stuck with me. Just because it was so weird. Like, like teenage girl waking up in the middle of the nap, just like laughing with this like deep laughter. Ugh.
Right. Those are like the creepiest, right? Because it's like, oh well, maybe I had some weird dream or something, but then it's like, oh, when he sees something independently, he goes, oh no, there was like a guy there laughing, and you meet later and go, what the hell did this happen? That's
exactly. That's so creepy.
So as a professor here, what's the most horrifying excuse a student has ever given you?
The horrifying excuse for me are the lamest ones. It's just where you can kind of always tell that they're making stuff up, they're lying, or they're just not in it. Like I almost rather like have a student be straight out with me and be like, you know what? I was tired, I had a long day. And I actually had, a student one time reach out to me and say like they've been dealing with some stuff. Like I'm a big advocate on mental health. And they did say like they were dealing with some things, and I gave them some resource information in regards to that, but I also like gave them an extension on their project, and then just told them make sure they speak with a counselor if it gets to be too much, and also speak with their advisor, because they there's different processes. But yeah, the horrifying excuses for me has always been the lamest ones, where it's just like, just be honest with me. Like, I know you're human, I'm human, I was a student once. Like there's no point and like, making a far-fetched story of like, great, this if this was a creative writing class, cool. But like,
Yeah,
just be straight up, there's
yeah,
no point in doing that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think good. Um, so Chupacabra, hoax, alien, mutant creature, or my cousin Elroy after one too many pints.
Well, I don't know your cousin Elroy. Sounds like fun. No, I don't know. I don't want to say it's a hoax. To my knowledge, it's the only cryptid that we have in Puerto Rico. Um, I don't want to say it's a hoax. I feel like maybe it is. Maybe it's just a vampire who doesn't want to like eat people and it's just out there eating
Maybe,
goats and
yeah.
cows and such. But yeah, no, it's synonymous with our culture, and so that's why like I love it. Much like how people of Virginia, or especially West Virginia with the Mothman,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, for
it's just
sure.
like, give it its due. It's not a hoax. It'll
Mhm.
eat your goats. That's pretty much it.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is funny though. I think the monsters, it's very I think it's a primal thing, right? I mean, there's even if nothing happened, there's still just monster stories that go back.
Yeah.
And it's because there was monsters, right? I mean, we're living around with saber-tooth tigers, and I mean, even after that, right? Just lions, things
Yeah.
like this, you had to contend with.
Exactly.
But yeah, but I love my Mothman and Chupacabras, all things. I love the
Yeah.
stories with them. I also I put a lot more faith in what people say. Right? I know there's going to be
Mhm.
people that are going to make up a story, but I don't think that's the majority. I don't think most people actually make up stories. There's a few people that do it,
No.
but
It's always like, and the story's always like connected in a way where you're just like, this could be real. Like this
Mhm.
could have actually happened. Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's like something weird's going on. Don't know exactly
Yeah,
what
exactly.
until we kind of figure it out. Something weird is there.
Anything is possible.
Yeah, yeah, amen. What's the biggest risk you ever took?
There's so many, and I'm actually proud to say that there are so many, but the biggest one within like the context of writing was acquiring an agent, working with an agent, and then firing this agent.
Very good.
Yeah, it's just like it was a process. It was a journey. Like you don't know what to expect.
Right.
And no matter who you ask for advice that's been in that opportunity, it's gonna be it's gonna be different with everybody. So yeah, I feel like that was like the biggest risk was to sign a contract, not knowing what to expect from it, and then just saying like this isn't working for me or severing the contract. So that in the writing world, that was like my biggest risk.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Amen. And it's funny, they had a story published, and I usually cut it when I do say the name, but there's a publisher that I think is still around that published it, but they it did not work out. It's kind of a horror story, and actually there's other authors that were around the same time that came close with after meeting from all of this, but there was so I got the rights back to it. So the book was called The Hordes of Torment. My novel was about a hoarder and this guy that was a complete disaster who's thrust into trying to help her. And so it was kind of a disaster. And I was like, I just want to get the rights back. And I talked to a few other writers. They're like, it could also look bad in the future though. Right. So a publisher could see that and say, oh, look, this guy jumps out, da. And I was like, but I feel like there's something I wanted to express there. It's just gotten buried. They didn't even copy edit the book. That just kills me to my core. And the front page had a quotation facing the wrong way. And I was like, faced the wrong way. And I'm like, what? I thought it was the advanced reader copy, so it wouldn't be a big deal, right? That's what they told me that I had in my hands anyways. But I'm like, did I do that? I've edited this thing like a billion times. Like I would have caught that. And I looked and I didn't, because it's like, it's so hard to like edit your own work perfectly, right? So it's like, okay, well, I put it wrong, but I'm like, they didn't copy it. And that ended up being the final copy that they were selling. And so they didn't copy edit it even at all. And so I did. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sever the relationship, get the rights back. And then we'll just see where the pieces fall in the future with it. But I'm like, I spent all this time on it. I hate the idea that it wasn't something I actually have, like, I forget how much they gave me as part of the contract, 50 or 100 books sitting in the closet. And I'm like, I should go put them out like tiny libraries and things. So I'm also, part of me is like, I'm also just horrified that it's not like a reading capable. So even giving it away for free. It just sits there, and I'm like, I should do that. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. So I have to bite the bullet and shore up some closet space at some point, I guess.
And I think that's like important to like point out, right? Where it's just right. So like they tell you like what's important within the writing world is networking and working with people and such in the industry. And there's like this fear of like, well, if I stick up for myself or for my writing or whatever have you, it might ruffle some feathers, they might get around, it'll make me look like a certain type of writer, then no one wants to work with me. And it's just like, no, like when like that there's certain battles that, you can just leave alone, and other ones that you can, just choose your battles wisely. But it's always a risk. Definitely writing or publishing, it's a gamble, like big time.
Right.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Right. Yeah. Amen. Well, and now with self-publishing and everything else, I think this was a few months back, but there was the Los Angeles Times bestseller list. It was like 3 of the top 5 were people that had all originally self-published and sold a bunch, nice. And then they got a contract from HarperCollins or whoever it was, and then that's when it went on the formal bestseller list. But it's like, so there's different avenues. I don't you should be good to work with. Like, you should be professional about it. Be good to work with. But sometimes you need to find a new gig. You have a job. Yeah. Sometimes you find a new job. Agent, publisher. Sometimes you just gotta move on, and it's okay for them to move on from you. It's okay for you to move on from them. So.
Yeah, as long as you keep it professional and they keep it professional, hopefully they keep it professional. Right. But yeah, it's just like, it's for other writers or anybody out there that's looking for that. Yeah, it's just, don't be afraid to say this isn't working, but, don't be an asshole about it. It should be fine.
Right. Yep. So moving on with shots here. So A Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween or Christmas movie?
Wait, what was the second one?
Is it a Halloween or is it a Christmas movie?
Oh, gotcha. Oh.
I thought you'd be the perfect person to ask.
Got me stumped with that one, right? Because my wedding anniversary is on Halloween and my birthday is on Christmas. I'm gonna say it's the perfect Thanksgiving movie.
To split the difference.
Yeah, exactly. It's in between. It's definitely a Halloween movie because it's a lot more creepier than it is Christmassy. But you can still watch it during Christmas, so
that's so true.
Like Die Hard, it's a Christmas movie.
Very true. Very true. Awesome. And last one here. So, favorite podcast host?
Favorite podcast host. You were talking about murder, like true crime podcasts. I happen to love this one podcast called Love Murder, and it's based on murders that like occur because of like love that has gone wrong. Yeah, and it's I want to say Andy Cassette and Jesse or Jessica Prey. They're the hosts of it. Sometimes it just sounds like you're in the middle of two really good friends talking to each other. And that's normally why I throw it on, which is weird. It's just like, yeah, true crime. And yes, I like learning about the psyche of people, why they, supposedly say they did what they did or whatever. But sometimes, like, I'll just throw it on in the background just to hear them talk because it just, I don't know. It's weird to say this about a true crime podcast. They're adorable. Those two. It's weird to say it about a true crime podcast, but they are. They're very sweet. They try to like, talk about the context in a very endearing way, especially about like the victims and such. And then it's always like funny when they kind of shit talk the killer or what have you. But yeah. So it's called Love Murder, and the hosts are Andy Cassette and Jesse Prey.
Very good. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. Awesome. So I think we'll adjourn our shots for tonight. Yeah. I'll be right with you. Oh, hello. Fancy meeting you here on the show I host and edit. William R. Hincy. I'm taking a break from my hosting gig at Writers Week of Whiskey to look oh so stylish and oh so suave in my fire mood glasses. As you guessed it, that is today's sponsor. If you'd like to get a 50% off already affordable glasses with tons of selection, you can use the promo code maybe here if you're on the YouTube box and you see my hands. If you're listening on a podcast, you can find it in the description. So check out the link, get your 50% off, support the show, and support restocking the bar behind me because it is an expensive chore to keep that puppy up. Thanks, everyone. And as we used to say in the 80s, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Thank you for that. And did you have something you could read for us today?
I sure do. Let's see. I will... Here's the dreaded novel. Not dreaded. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay. So this is from The Amber Within. This is where Clara, the main character, had just got into Puerto Rico. They, ventured via boat to Puerto Rico from England, and this is her first time stepping back into the island that she was born on. We ascended to the cobblestone streets filled with bustling locals selling their fruits, spices, and wares. The different jubilation that surrounded us felt like a mockery. I tried my hardest to feel the happiness my father had expressed of this place, but my bitterness would not let me go. My boy was missing, and everyone around me were as joyous as they could be. My legs carried me as quickly as possible to the carriages. I wanted to leave immediately so that I can lock my own self away until my Alistair was found, but the island intervened. I spotted a group of natives dressed in white gathered around the town square. The women had their hair wrapped with different colored scarves that matched the sashes around their waists. The men wore beaded necklaces of various colors as well. Drummers lined up in a semicircle behind baskets of fruits, flowers, and blue, green, and yellow feathers. Behind the drummer was a statue of a beautiful woman donned in gold and with the baby boy in her arms. A longing consumed me when I noticed the babe and drew me in closer to the crowd. A beautiful dark-skinned woman wearing multicolored sashes parted the onlookers. She held the lit end of a cigar to her lips as she puffed it. She blew the smoke to the left of her right, above her, and down at her feet. Chills pricked my skin, but I continued to watch her. She spoke in a language I've never heard before, but it felt familiar to me. My heart pounded as the crowd chanted back to her. She blew out another puff of smoke in front of her as she approached me. I stared at her deep brown eyes when she peered into mine. Powerless, my body stood frozen. A tingling sensation invaded my scalp as she closed in on me. She stopped inches away from my face, puffed on her cigar once more, and blew smoke all around me. The sweet cedar scent entered my nostrils and down to my lungs. When the smoke cleared, her wide smile broke whatever inclinations I had of her. Someone handed her a horsetail whip, but she made her way back to the drummers. She raised the whip above her head and dropped it. The drums pounded each time she did this, once, twice, a third time. After the third strike, she hollered, and the drums banged rhythmically, following her gyrations. She swung the whip up above her head and down to her side with each turn. Her yells sounded out like thunder as she lashed the horsetail all around her. Simultaneously, she and the drummers stopped.
So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I look forward to hearing about when you finish the edits on that.
Me too.
I know. That'll be a day to crack open a bottle for sure.
Yes.
And so that brings me to the question. So what is next for you as a writer? Is it finishing that up? Is there anything else going on?
There's several. I think we discussed this.
Sure.
Yeah, it's definitely working on the edits for The Amber Within, my first novel out of the Sangria series. And I'm also working on a set of short story collections in regards to like a anthropologist going around to different places and different countries and such, and studying like supernatural events that occurred. And so I had a working title for it. It's called like the Viajes Misterios, meaning like the mysterious adventures of Dr. Rodriguez. And it's going to take place, of course, like in the 1800s. And essentially there's a plot tied to her that she is more than just an anthropologist. Like there's a reason why that she gets involved in the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
Working on that, possibly working on I think it's called like I kept the pronunciation, epistolatory novel or novelette that has to do with Edgar Allen Poe. It's almost like a Poe's paramours writing letters to him that involve some of the stories that he has created. So I'll be working on that. I'm not working on the novel and the other short story. And working on the marketing for my poetry book that was just published in April.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it. Awesome. So then I like to say on this show, it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. And I like to ask, so we're taking to changing the answers here this next season, but what is something that you gained or a way that it's affected you through writing, reading, interrelated, however you want to do it, that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise?
Actually, the connection with other people, with other writers. I know that like it kind of sort of like speaks for itself, but like, yeah, that's when you're networking, but I didn't realize, like writing is a very lonely skill or hobby or whatever you want to call it. It is pretty lonely. I mean, it has to be, right? Because you have to be submerged into like your own world. So you're sort of like daydreaming a lot. And I've always been like a daydreamer my entire life. And I've had like friends scattered here and there, but the relationships were just, more on like friend to acquaintance level. But when you come together with other writers, it's just, I don't know, it's a bit more, I want to say like it's a bit more magical compared to other friendships I've had. But yeah, I do treasure the friendships I have with other writers. It's like, I guess I'd explain it to a non-writer. Like if you've gone to college and you lived in a dorm and you've made friends with your like dorm mates or your sorority sisters and fraternity brothers, and that relationship lasts for like almost forever. That's what it feels like being friends with other writers.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I get that completely. Kind of the kindred spirits.
Yeah, exactly.
That's always nice. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, for that. Thanks so much. I'm glad we got to spend some more time. I know C3, I think that was right at the end. And they're like, everyone wants to clean up now. But it was really lovely to get to sit and get, chat with you for, longer than the 10 minutes or whatever it was we had there. And get to know you better and get to hear your work. If anyone does want to learn more about you, what's the best place to direct them?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and the one that shall not be mentioned. I'm on there as Sparrow's Inkwell. That is SPARROWSINKWELL, Sparrow's Inkwell. I also have a website, which is www.sparrowsinkwell.com. Yeah, you can reach out to me. You can go on my Instagram. You'll see feeds, a lot of personal stuff on the feeds on there because it's sort of like an open book. But yeah, come on out, say hello. You have a question, put it out there. I may or may not answer it, depending on the question. Don't DM me any weird stuff because
right,
immediate block.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that. And I'll link up the at least the website. There is a little description length that hits on the YouTube box. So I'll put your website on there, and people can find you and your socials.
Thank you.
From there. So thanks again, so much.
Thank you. This is fun. I love this. I hopefully, you probably did like an anniversary thing or whatever, bringing back some writers that you've already interviewed. So
extra shots. Question for the audience: what is your favorite Edgar Allan Poe story or poem? Let us know down there in the comments section. Love to talk some Poe. If someone wants to correct my butchering of his quote, you can throw it down there as well. We will community fact check our literary references here. Thanks again so much for watching. Again, if you are interested in the open bar content and you want to join us over at Rumble, you can find us there, and you'll find the open bars a tad sooner, although they will still, of course, be here on the YouTube box. And if you do want to find us in a podcast version to listen to as you work out or drive or do whatever it is you're doing, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, etc., etc. All your podcasting formats, you will probably find us there, as it's a service and you just pump them and they go there. And it actually takes very little effort from us lowly podcast hosts. So thanks again, everyone, for watching. You guys have a wonderful night, evening, morning, whatever it is when you hear me and you hear my voice or you see my face. You guys stay saucy, and cheers, everybody.